Hi, my name's Matthew Brough, and I'm the author of Ryder and the Crystal Seed and the upcoming Ryder and the Rescue of Eleanor. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today here from my lovely kitchen about some of the influences that were behind the book that I wrote. Oh, I'll just show you. There's the book again, so you remember it. One of the things that was one of the biggest influences behind the writing of this book, I'm not sure if you would have heard of this or not. It's not really in the mainstream or very popular, but it's just a little movie called Star Wars. And it's one of those movies, you know, everybody's seen it, right? And it's had such an influence on so many different things. I watched it when I was a little kid, and we're talking about the original one, Episode 4, A New Hope. And when I watched that movie, I just thought, oh, these effects are so cool and so amazing. And I thought I loved the movie because of all the action and the lightsabers and all of the cool spaceships and all of the amazing effects that went on and all that stuff. And as I got older, I realized that, well, first of all, the effects weren't necessarily good. I mean, they were great when I was a kid, and but you see like the new movie, it just blows you away, right? Like it's just totally amazing. But really, what was great about Star Wars was the story. I mean, that is really why that movie, I think, did so well. If it was just great special effects, there's been other movies with great special effects that just haven't done as well and haven't captured people's imagination as much as that movie has. And I see that Star Wars really has, as a whole story, it's got a few important things in it. One is that it's a story about a group of friends, and those friends are helping each other throughout the movie. It's a story about good versus evil. In the end, that's what it's about, is good versus evil. And it's also a story that centers around family, kind of follows the Skywalker family throughout the entire series. And that's really more of what the influence is for me. My book's not in space. It's a fantasy adventure book, but it's about 4 kids who are friends. But there's also stuff in it about family as well, about the main character Dell and her family, and where that's going to go in future books. I can't really tell you about that, but that's going to be an important thing in other books that come out, her family. But in the end, the book and the series is really about this struggle between good versus evil. And when you think about some of the best stories that are out there, they tend to have those kinds of elements. They tend to have good versus evil, friends, and family. And that's kind of why Star Wars is such a big influence on my book. I want to tell you about a couple of other ones too. When I was a little boy, about 5 years old, my mom read to me and my sisters in the car on a road trip going across Western Canada. She read to us The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And this is my copy of the Chronicles of Narnia, which is just a phenomenal series of books. And in Ryder and the Crystal Seed, the kids in my book, they find their way through into another world through this kind of magic portal. It's not a wardrobe like in Narnia, but it's through some other way that they get into another world. So my book's kind of influenced by Narnia and just this idea that regular kids can end up in this other fantasy world and where things go on. And again, Narnia has some of those same themes. The kids in that book are family, but there's also friendships that are developed, and it's a story about good versus evil. So those influences are there again. Now, as I got older, I started to really fall in love with another book, and it kind of happened when I was in grade 8. And that book was The Hobbit. And again, some of these are just the classics of sort of fantasy books. J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis just have been a huge influence on me and so many other people. The thing for me was I actually didn't really like reading that much. I just thought I didn't like books and I didn't like reading. Like I didn't mind listening to my mom read Narnia to us, and that was okay. And I read books for school reluctantly. I didn't really like the books that our teachers assigned, and I just thought I didn't like reading, and I was never going to be a reader. And I'm still a pretty slow reader. It takes me a while to read through a book. But when I got to grade 8, this book got assigned to me, and I had to do a book report on it. And this was the first book I had ever read where I wanted to read it again as soon as I was done. So that's exactly what I did. I just loved The Hobbit and loved the world that I was reading in. It was just so captivating and amazing. And so the following year, I moved on to The Lord of the Rings. And this is my copy that I had in grade 9 of The Fellowship of the Ring. And so it took me, again, I was a slow reader. It took me the entire year of grade 9 to make it through all 3 books of The Lord of the Rings. And you know, lots of kids now read it way earlier, and even back then had read it much earlier than I had and could just fly through it no problem. And I really struggled, even in grade 9, to get through this series, but just loved it every step of the way. And still, it's just my favorite series of books of all time is The Lord of the Rings, and just love that. And you know, seen the movies and all that stuff, like probably most of you have too, and just love those movies. And one of the things that I just loved, and I don't know if anybody who's watching this when you're in school, or if you've been in school, you would sit, and while you're supposed to be listening to the teacher, you might doodle on a piece of paper. I didn't doodle pictures. I'm a terrible artist. I can't draw. Like my daughter, who's now 6, is a better artist than I am. And but one of the things that I found in the Lord of the Rings books and in the Hobbit book, you might know that either at the front or the back, depending on which edition you have, and lots of books now have this, but I'd never seen it before, there are maps. And I just love this. I've always loved maps, whether they're real maps or fantasy maps. I just love them, and it's kind of a geeky thing. And so my family knew that I loved maps, and what I would do is I would sit, instead of doodling like pictures of people or whatever other people were doodling, I would doodle maps like there were in The Lord of the Rings, and kind of think about these fantasy worlds that I was kind of making up as I was making a map. So I wasn't writing, but I was imagining these characters or beings or places and geography of a world that I was making a map for. I never kept any of them because it was kind of thought, I felt like, oh, that was kind of a loser thing to do. And so I got rid of all of them, and wish I had them now. I had no idea then, when I was 14, 15 years old, that doodling these maps that I never showed anybody, that eventually one day I was going to write a fantasy book. And now I've had to start working on a map just to keep things straight in the world that I've got. So my map's not going to be in the books anytime soon, but I'm hoping maybe by the time the series is done, there might be able to be a map of the world of Asdia, which is the name of the world that's part of my series. Now, I love the maps so much, and I just wanted to show you this because it's I think it's great. I still have it. That my family bought me for Christmas one year. Someone in my family bought me this, the Atlas of Middle-earth by Karen Wynne Fonstad. And I just thought this was the coolest thing ever. And it's just got these amazing maps. I marked a couple of them here. So it's got, like, look at that. That's Middle-earth there. And let's see, what was the other one? Oh, yeah. Okay, so there's Gondor. And I don't know if you can see that well. It's pretty good. And I just thought this was the greatest thing ever. So I would go and I would study like the maps of Middle-earth, and try to figure out and track the voyages of the different people in the various books of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all of the other stuff in that world that came before it too. So I just love those maps, and that just got my imagination going. But yeah, like I said, I had no idea that I was one day going to write a fantasy adventure book that would need a map. But I think my imagination was working in that time. But it took me till I was 40 before I actually sat down and wrote Ryder and the Crystal Seed. So these are just some of the influences that went into the first book and the ongoing series, and I hope you've enjoyed watching today. Just to remind you, I'll grab it here, just to remind you, Ryder and the Crystal Seed is on Kindle and Kobo and iBooks. and Nook, and it's free as an ebook. You can also order it on Amazon. You can order the paperback on Amazon, but it's free as an ebook, and you can just download it. And I would love it if you've had a chance to read it. Just leave a rating and review for me. That really helps people see the book. And also, the second book in the series is coming out May 19th, Ryder and the Rescue of Eleanor. And if you want more information about that, you can just go to my website. It's mattbrough.com, mattbrough.com. Thanks for watching.